all we do is make it.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
I'm not going to approve it.
Right. Yeah.
All we do is make
We
it.
got so many people between us and their meeting and the Daniel Island ARP.
I will say this: had it been a Daniel Island company project, they would have met with them. They would have come up with some sort of
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Enough said.
All right. As a courtesy, if y'all would step aside. All right. Subdivisions number 2, Central Park Cluster Development, Central Park Road, James Island, TMS 34003000007, 10.35 acres, 39 lots. Request subdivision concept plan approval. Zone single family residential SR1. And it's probably not necessary, but I will say this again, just since I know there's a lot of people here, probably for this application. Please, again, be respectful of your neighbor and other people's opinions, and that's all I'm going to say. That's a joke.
Thank you. Yes, this is nearly a 10.5 acre site on Central Park Road on James Island. Folly Road is to the east, Fleming Road is to the west. It is zoned single-family residential SR1. Now, we touched a little bit about this in the last item. Subdivisions that are developed under a regular base zoning, for example, if this were being developed under just the regular SR1 zone district, there are minimum lot standards, for example, minimum lot area, minimum lot frontage, as well as minimum street standards, right-of-way width, pavement width, etc. This is another one of the cluster development subdivision proposals. So with a cluster development, those minimum lot and street standards are not part of a cluster development. There is no minimum lot area requirement, no minimum lot frontage requirement, no minimum pavement width requirement. But instead, the proposed development has to provide a clustering of the lots, reduction in the overall infrastructure to reduce things like runoff, etc. As well as they must provide a minimum percentage of open space, a percentage of the gross land area protected in quality open space. So the proposal that we have here for this property, we've turned this on its side a little bit, so now Central Park Road is over to the right side of your screen. This shows the proposed layout of the cluster development. As you can see, most of the lots are generally clustered towards the front of the development, with larger open spaces being preserved kind of in the center of the development here, as well as to the rear. This would be the north end of the property, adjacent to the existing wetland. That wetland there is a jurisdictional wetland. It is not proposed to be impacted by this development. There are, as you can see, new rights-of-way proposed. A few sections of the streets do include on-street parking. And those new rights-of-way will serve a total of 40 lots for single-family detached homes. And the open space that I mentioned before, it does satisfy, in this case, minimum 50% of the total land area must be conserved in open space, and it does satisfy that 50% requirement. One topic of lots of discussion during the review in the technical review committee was drainage. This is an area with drainage concerns. In particular, there is an existing ditch that runs along the west side of the property that I'm sure we'll discuss more. And one proposal, one part of this proposal is that there will be an easement platted along that western edge of this property, adjacent to the existing drainage ditch that is there, to allow for easier access to maintain and widen, if necessary, that drainage facility. Of course, we don't get into all of the specifics about drainage calculations until we review the road construction documents in Technical Review Committee, assuming this moves forward. But that has been a topic of conversation to this point. An interesting aspect about that easement is that when an easement is platted, our ordinances that protect grand trees no longer apply, because it's assumed that in order to get into that easement with the appropriate machinery and equipment, that those grand trees would have to go away. So the only condition of approval that is being offered tonight is that in order to progress with this subdivision and prior to a preliminary subdivision plat or road construction plans being submitted back to TRC for review, that there must be an approval by the Board of Zoning Appeals site design to remove those grand trees. There are a few grand trees that are proposed to be removed that are not in that easement area, that are in other areas of the site. That application to the Board of Zoning Appeals has not been made yet. And until that submittal is made to that board, the city staff has not really reviewed what the request is in depth or gone out and looked at those trees individually. So the city staff does not have a recommendation related to that request to remove grand trees, but we have identified that that request will need to be approved before they can move forward with the proposed subdivision. If they go to the board and that request to remove grand trees is not approved, then they would have to come back and do a revised concept plan, and we'd have to go back to the drawing board a little bit. But with that major consideration, the Technical Review Committee has reviewed this application and have determined that it complies with the lot design, the reduction in infrastructure, the minimum open space requirements, all of those cluster development requirements that are written in the ordinance. So with that one condition for the removal of grand trees being approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals site design, the city staff recommendation is for approval.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jolko. And then real quick, just unusual to say one thing here, just since the question came up about subdivisions and those sorts of things. One thing that I think everybody here is concerned about is drainage, but we're not civil engineers, and while we appreciate drainage concerns, the ultimate, and I know somebody's going to raise drainage concerns, but I just want to clarify that we rely on the city staff, the engineering department, stormwater to ultimately decide whether a site and a development meets the stormwater management requirements. But anyways, the applicant here.
Yes. Bill Eubanks, Senior Whiteside. Good evening. I think this is an ideal site for the application of this overlay. It's a small infill site. Its proximity to both Folly Road and the connector make it ideal for this type of development. We are under the density allowance of SR1. We're exceeding our open space requirements. We do know that we're going to have to move forward with BZA. We've had an arborist evaluate the trees, so we'll be getting out on the site with Eric and doing that after this approval. We're meeting all the requirements of the ordinance. The on-street parking that was mentioned is for guest parking. There will also be 2 parking spaces on each lot. So the parallel parking on the street is really just kind of guest parking. And Jason Monday is going to address some of the infrastructure issues.
Yes, and a couple of things to point out. We have met with the neighborhood on a few occasions. We do know the concerns about stormwater management. It was a very sensitive issue in our design. And I am a civil engineer, so I can't answer the stormwater questions. We went through a very rigorous and stringent stormwater review through the TRC process leading up to this, through the city's stormwater department. And I mean, really, it was about a 4-month process and several meetings with the city before they became comfortable given the sensitivity of this area. I do want to point out that our drainage analysis doesn't only just account for this 10.35 acre site. We actually looked at 150 acres, so the overall watershed that drains to, and Stephen, if you don't mind pulling up this, that drains through this ditch of concern for the neighborhoods. So we studied several points within that ditch to see what the response was both in the pre-development condition and the post-development condition. I do want to note that our 10-acre site only makes up about 7% of the total drainage basin. So we're the small contributor to a larger global problem that exists right now. So for someone to come in and say that we're going to be the cause of the problem, there is a problem. And we have proven through our drainage analysis that we not only reduce the runoff rates from our site, but we also lower the staging within the ditch, which equates to the total volume of water that's released. So, a lot of times people talk about release rates, but volume is a big issue too when you talk about stormwater. So we've addressed both of those concerns in our drainage analysis that has been reviewed by city staff. The other thing I do want to note too is of the remaining 140 acres in that watershed is undetained water. It flows through these conveyances undetained. Of course, our development will have a on-site stormwater detention pond that will capture the impervious areas, which are minimized too by the essence of the cluster development. In addition to that, there are some drainage issues that existed. This is county, this is city property, but there were some drainage issues we identified on the, help me out with my direction, eastern side of this property that we've addressed through our drainage analysis as well, with upsizing pipes, putting in some new stormwater wetlands. These wetlands alone increased the overall storage that was available in the existing condition, just these two ponds. And then this would capture the on-site drainage for our post-development. So there were two concerns when we met with the neighborhood that were brought to our attention. The first was the need for maintenance of this ditch. There's severe sloughing of the ditch. And that was noted. We saw pictures from the neighborhood, but that's an existing issue that exists now. That's what gave us the idea of, well, one of the issues with maintenance is access to the ditch. So we thought that that would be a give to the neighborhood so that we could provide access through this property to maintain that ditch adequately, and or if need be, expand the ditch in the future. I do want to point out that our plan as it exists now does not look at removing any of these trees within the easement. That is not our plan that's in place now. Stephen did point out that it is a drainage easement. If for some reason in the future there is a need to expand that ditch by the city to maintain it, that would be the reason for those trees. But our plan does not look at removing these trees. Of the trees that we are removing, the majority of them are D grade and F grade trees. We do have a few C grade trees and one B, but based on our arborist assessment. So we do feel fairly confident with a BOZA application. Just making sure I cover everything. Yeah. So that's all. Yeah.
One thing that we did neglect to say is there's a 0.35 acre piece up on the front that's going to be deeded over to the East Cooper Land Trust for community use.
That would be this here, up along Central Park.
What? East Cooper? East Cooper?
Do you want me to?
Well, we'll address that. Go ahead and see. Yeah.
I'll go ahead and do it. And I apologize. I'm going to take off my hat. I also serve on the board for the East Cooper Land Trust. Although anytime this project is brought up, I recuse myself and leave the room. But East Cooper Land Trust is that's the name of it, but they don't limit themselves to the East Cooper area. For example, they hold the conservation easement on the site in West Ashley where Magnolia Community Gardens are. They happen to be the only kind of urban land trust in the Charleston area that is willing to take small parcels that that have community access.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone here in favor of the application? Anyone here opposed to the application? All right. Well, again, try not to be too repetitive and acknowledge other people's points. We want to hear what you have to say. And because we have so many people, if you can, limit yourself to 2 minutes if you can. And if there's somebody who's a neighborhood representative or somebody like that wants to kind of carry the football the furthest part first, we'd love to hear from them. Obviously, yes.
My name is Harriet Revis, and I am, excuse me, president of the Marlboro Neighborhood Association. And I will say that we were invited to one meeting by the developer, and they showed us what they were planning to do, and we were not contacted any further after that. We did elect to sit in on one of the TRC meetings, but of course there's no public comment during that meeting time, so we can't do that. So, I have for you a petition signed by nearly every household in our neighborhood opposing this.
Thank you.
And there are also some names from Laurel Park included in that. There are over 100 names in that petition. Just imagine 100 people sitting here before you. We have many young families, and they are not able to leave their children. But I would like for those who are opposed to this, if you would raise your hands again, so they will see, both from Marlboro and Laurel Park. Why are we opposed? I'll just touch on 3 areas. The big one is the drainage. We have a drainage canal right here that is inadequate. The city knows that this canal is not adequate, has problems. I realize you can't do anything about that. But we, and also when we have high tides, the water rushes back in, it comes into the neighborhood, comes through the gutters, floods the street here, goes all the way around the circle to West Wimbledon and floods the street. So we have issues, and my understanding is that the volume of water is not something that's controlled by the city, because the manual does not control that. And so I don't know what they've done, because we haven't had any communication. Excuse me. When I spoke before this commission several years ago concerning the Fleming Park cluster, one of the people on the board after the open forum said the engineers will get it right. Well, I couldn't respond, so I've been waiting all this time to respond. Our neighborhood knows that that's not always the case, because the city enlarged and renovated the Maybank Tennis Center. We are still faced with flooding issues from that, so we know that there are problems. Also, when I was here before, I think Ms. Emphasis said she lived in the neighborhood for a short time. Our drainage issues are very different from when you lived there, very different. And these people, all of us invested in our homes, and we really feel that this is not in keeping with our neighborhood. Also, we feel like the volume of water is going to affect this even more. And also, we're concerned about the grand trees, because as they stated, this is supposed to be an easement, and if the city needs equipment to drive through here to clean the ditch out, the trees have to go, and the trees are helping to absorb water. So we are very concerned about that. Other designs could probably do workarounds with those trees. Also, I didn't see any point on this plan for a collection area for sludge. When this canal, it's a canal, it's not a ditch. When this canal is clean, you have to put that wet sludge somewhere, because the dump truck drivers will not haul it, because it's dangerous. So you have to have an area for wet sludge to be held so it can dry out. I don't see any evidence of that. So we ask that you would oppose this. And we have many who are going to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
One other
Revis.
point.
Oh.
I think the agenda says 39 homes, and I heard someone say 40, so we have a difference there.
Okay. You in the front, yes, sir. Councilman McGray, sorry, I apologize.
I lived here for 30 years. Here. And I haven't had flood since I've been there. I lived in this house for over 40-something years, and we never had a flood. We went, when the last storm came through, we went to my daughter in Georgia, and I'm in a mobile home right on the road. My daughter texted or whatever she does on her phone.
That's a good one.
The EME apartment is across the street. They were flooded. I changed my hot water heater from the inside to the outside so I can have gas. I thought that when I came home that everything would have been floated away. The hot water heater was working, everything. We never had a flood there. We never had a water with problem there. And I've been here for 30 years. My mother and my father owned that property. It's been in the family for over 100 years. And we never had a flood there. So I don't know where they're coming from with water and stuff like this. And I live right by the ditch. The ditch runs right by my house. And we never had any problem. My sister lived here. We never had a problem with water or anything. The water runs off. Everybody else got flooded, but we didn't. Because we on a high property. We on prime property. Our property is high.
Shh, okay, if you would let him speak,
and
please.
the water runs off into the ditch and go on out. We never had any problem. I don't know what the issue with the water problem. I never had it.
Okay, thank you, sir. Are you done? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I mean,
Councilman
in all
Gregg.
due respect
Yeah.
to the developers, and I'm not an engineer, I'm just sort of a cause and effect person. And that area has experienced unbelievable development. The zoning for most of these things occurred back in 2006. They predate me. But I've been trying to make sure that any new development has a minimal effect on existing neighborhoods. We were told the same thing about the Fleming cluster, that it would not have an effect. Best engineers in the world said it would, but cause and effect. It did have an unbelievable effect on the Marlborough neighborhood in particular. I'm in support of my neighborhood association with regard to opposing this project. I'm opposing it because, one, the city has to do a little more work with their storm management manual. It has to be updated, I think considerably. It has to be updated so that we can sort of deal with volume if necessary. I've been to the ditch. That ditch has already started to, that channel has already started to cause sinkholes in the rear of many of the homes on Wimbledon. And I think that we really need to sit down a little more and discuss the flooding. I know the retention ponds are there. I know the best engineer. But again, I'm a cause and effect person. I'm not an engineer. And I do strongly feel that this development will have an effect on the older neighborhoods. It's already having an effect in terms of designs. And again, these are city issues to me. It's going to, if we continue this, it's going to change the character of many of the older neighborhoods in that area. But for me, it's the water. It's all about the water and the cause and effect. And I do think that if the city and the county does not get in there and do something with respect to that canal, this project will have a negative effect.
Thank you, Councilman Gregory. Yes, sir.
Speak, please, sir.
Sure.
All right. First of all,
If you would state your name and address.
My name
Yeah.
is James Mazik. I live in Laurel Park neighborhood. Because one house doesn't flood doesn't negate the fact that many of our houses are flooding and have been for many years. So Laurel Park's up in here. Am I right? This is the east side.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you put that back to that one? All right. This whole neighborhood, Laurel Park, comes through all these streets, and then it runs through a ditch through the woods here and meets up with this ditch and goes under Central Park Road to the creek. Am I right? Right. Okay. All through here is really backed up, causes the whole neighborhood to back up over here. So if you're living out here, you probably ain't experiencing everything over here, all these people. So I just want to get it straight with the people that are developing this. These ponds probably aren't big enough. The ditches coming through here, it's a nightmare. My house is flooded 3 times in the last 2 years. And people's garages, the crawl spaces, there's tons of people. A lot of people aren't even here. There's probably 100 more. But these neighborhoods, they're old existing neighborhoods, and to build this right here on this piece of dirt, where all neighborhood drains this ditch, they meet up and they go that way. It's just a horrible idea to develop on this dirt. Unless you can make these detention ponds bigger. I think it should be a detention pond maybe. So it holds water, and when low tide comes, it's able to go out with low tide, because every time it's high tide, the water comes right back in to this area. So maybe some flat valves on the pipes is a good idea. It's just, I'm sorry to reiterate drainage, but it's a big deal. It's really a big deal. A lot of people's houses are a mess. As far as the traffic and the trees, I'll let somebody else speak on that. That's its own problem. But I just would ask you, put on your boots, come out there and walk with me. Call me on the phone, I'll take you out there and show you exactly what's going on with these ditches in this area. And then you're going to look at it and say, wow, that makes sense now. So I can't get anybody to walk with me. Joe Quayle did, but he's only one. My number is 843-817-4092. I'm serious. Walk with me. And talk about how to solve these problems with drainage before you build on it. So I think that's about all. Let's see. I hope you would take the time and make sure these studies are showing the existing problems from the existing neighborhoods before you build there. I know you mentioned that, but
All right, in the interest of time, Mr. Mazik, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Could you pull up the other map for me, please? I'm Lauren Dasher. I live in Laurel Park as well. And I just wanted to touch on a few things and ask that you consider not just the parcel that we're studying tonight, but that, like Mr. Gregory addressed, the larger area. Within the past 6 months and in the coming 6 months, we will see 128, I'm trying to get my bearings here, 128 apartments right here. We've seen 56 new cluster homes over here in Fleming Park. I don't know how many homes have been approved to go on the corner of Fleming and Central Park Road, just right down from here. Let's see, right down here. And then now 39 homes right here. That is a half a mile radius, not even radius. What we are looking at here is, obviously we've touched on drainage. The neighborhood school, the max for a classroom, South Carolina standard is 30. The students started this year with 32 plus kids in their class. There's still not a stop sign. There's still not a stop light at Riverland and Central Park. There's no safe way for the children from EME to park to cross to get to school. Traffic backs up further. This will be increased cars on the road. Not to mention drainage. And as Jason addressed, there already is a problem. So what we haven't seen, though, is the effect of the 128 apartments and the effect of the new neighborhood on Fleming and Central Park. We're just seeing the effect of Fleming Park. So to go ahead and approve 39, 40 homes for that area, I think would be irresponsible at this point. We know development's coming. That's obvious. Mr. Seabrook has every right to sell his property and to see it be developed, but I just ask that we can look at the density of it, because it's not that we are a group of just overzealous hippies that are against development. It's that this absolutely affects me every day. When I walk down to Murray Lassane to pick up my children, the sidewalk is impassable. It is flooding right there at the creek over the road. You have to go out on the road. I've called SCDOT multiple times over the past 4 months to ask them to cut back the brush so that you can pass down the sidewalk. They did it last week. School started in August. These are all just everyday issues that we're dealing with as families of Marlboro and Laurel Park. So I ask that you just consider tonight the full impact of approving that many homes in such a small area. And I thank you so much for your time. Oh, I wanted to touch on one more thing. Recently in the news this week, since we are talking about drainage, I know that you don't have the effect on that, but it's come up with the, let me get the name right, Church Creek Drainage Basin in West Ashley, and how that part of the solution is to spend $44 million to build solutions, stormwater pump, but the city of Charleston could end up spending $50 to $70 million to buy back 350 homes. And I would just think that responsibly, we should go on the front of this and go, what is the impact going to be from this one parcel when you're already looking at these issues in other areas of Charleston. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Stephen Green. It's a little awkward for me because I work for a site development contractor, so I've never been here before. But I happen to, could you flip that, Stephen, to this? I live right here on East Wimbledon. As everybody said, we have two issues with this. The density of it we feel is not keeping with a traditional neighborhood like our neighborhood in Laurel Park. I'll have 3 new houses within the width of my backyard alone, if this is continuing as it is designed. The drainage, I've talked to Jason about the drainage before. I can tell you that I think Jason is sincere, that he's done the best he can with his model. Unfortunately, the drainage that comes through here that goes under Central Park Road, goes under culverts in front of the EME apartments, goes down under culverts on Riley Road. Nobody has an answer whether they need maintenance, whether this flooding that we're experiencing is on title, whether the culverts are not large enough. And we were promised a drainage study almost 2 years ago when these issues started happening. And unfortunately for us, the Church Creek thing is taking precedence. So we're supposedly next on the list. So we don't oppose per se the development of this property. We would support something less dense, but we want the drainage study done so that we have all the information to protect us. My garage flooded in the great 2014 flood and flooded this past one with Irma. Several people on the streets have had their garages flood and their crawl spaces flooded at one time. We've replaced ductwork. And I've lived there for 18 going on 19 years. Until 4 years ago, we never had a flooding issue at all. This is all something that's going on, whether it's a maintenance issue. And Jason will admit his drainage study modeled to the culverts under Central Park Road, but there's no examination of the condition of any of these culverts downstream. So it's a computer simulation. The computer says, yes, the drainage will work. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. What we have right now, it's not working. So we just kind of want everybody to step back and let's get this drainage study done and possibly look at reducing the density of this to something that's more traditional.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Sure.
Lorraine Diver, I live next door to Steve at 520. May I approach? I will show you one picture. This is our backyard in September. It's completely flooded up past our fence. That's the canal that runs at 520 right behind them. So we are completely flooded. That's actually the third time that this has happened since we bought the house 2.5 years ago. When we bought it, it had not ever flooded in 30 years until we bought the house 2.5 years ago. This is the canal that runs behind our house. On
Did it
East
get up to your
Wimbledon.
house? Did it get up to your house?
It did. It actually, but we have brick facade, so fortunately it didn't get inside our house. But this is the third time that's happened.
How long have you lived here?
2.5 years. And of course, we beforehand, we made sure that it had never flooded before, and it hadn't prior to us purchasing the house. So there's obviously a problem that's happening in our area right now. So I just wanted to show you that.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Allison Wynn. I live at 489 West Wimbledon on this side of the circle of the Marlboro neighborhood. I'm here to talk about what happens on the west side when the east side fails. We purchased our home in 2014, and my husband and I were very diligent in purchasing a home in the least risk flood zone of James Island. We passed on many houses based on the flood zone they were in. Little did we know that we'd be impacted. The flooding that would impact us is man-made by the Fleming Road development. This is the third year in a row that we have had substantial flooding in our yard. Fortunately, we are one of the highest homes in Marlboro, and it has not come into the house yet, but it is working its way closer and closer to the house. During the last storm, as the East Canal failed and became overwhelmed, the water obviously came toward the west. Our property is on the canal, the underground canal or sewer system that drains the west side of the neighborhood, including the Fleming Road Canal, traveling east into the East Canal. As the east side failed, within about 15 minutes, we stood there in the driveway and watched a flash flood occur. All the water came rushing out of the sewer systems, which we've seen on 2 other occasions. And then it started meeting with the flood that was occurring in the backyards of all the people on the west side. As I stood in my backyard in a foot of water, I actually watched the flow of water reverse, going, instead of going west to east, it now came east to west, and there was no place to go. I mean, as I believe the civil engineer had pointed out, that we already know, and many of us already know, and we've established that clearly, that we have an inadequate drainage system in this neighborhood already. While their development is proposed to be only 7% of this 150-acre area, and it's considered a small impact, why would we add more impact to a system that's already failed at this point? Growth in Charleston and around our area is inevitable. Obviously, I'm a transplant to Charleston as well, and I'm very welcome here. But I don't understand why growth has to be at the expense of the existing neighborhoods that have been longstanding residents here and have been a strong taxpayer base at this point. With more science and investigation and engineering, and I've known 3 generations of civil engineers, and had many dinner table conversations about road drainage, we can live in harmony, but there clearly has to be more investigation and more study.
Thank you. Yes, sir. And I guess just some discussion amongst the board. I think we've established that there's a drainage problem. If you want to touch on it again.
Just a little point. My name is Jose Gavidia. I live right here. So what I want to say is that I've lived here for 15 years. And I came from trying to escape the overdevelopment in Mount Pleasant. So I moved to this area, and everything has been very nice for a number of years, and we never had these flooding problems, and they have gotten a lot worse in the last few years. So right now we have an issue where the water over the street gets like this high. Okay, my house is like way higher than the street, so I don't believe that my house is going to flood, but I'm seeing that my neighbors' garages are getting flooded. And the water is getting the houses are a little higher than the garages. So it is getting like really, really close to the point where actual houses are going to start flooding. So the next time that we have an event like this, if we have like 3 feet of water right now, if we get 4 or 3.5 feet, then we're going to have a catastrophe. And we're going to have a disaster with actual houses flooded. So I believe that a development like this, what happens is that right now, this is all trees, and they absorb a lot of the water, and this is undrained as it is right now. So suddenly, regardless of what the impervious surface of this is, suddenly all of this is going to be drained. So the water is not allowed to stand and be absorbed by the ground, and therefore the water is going to be drained. So the civil engineer mentioned that we're going to be as small contributors to the problem, but a small contribution to the problem is going to mean for a lot of people that the water is going to be above the floor of their houses. And that is going to happen in the next rain event or hurricane that we have after this is built. So we need to be very careful with approving a property that can cause a very serious problem.
Thank you, sir.
I just want to make one comment that goes along with
Could you mind stating your name?
I'm Carol Green. I
Okay.
live here.
Everybody seems to live there.
Yeah.
It's like 5 people living in that house. That's all right. Good. It's all
I'll
good.
give you one picture. It's along this, and then you talked with Steve. It goes along with what Harriet was saying about in this plan, there's no place when the ditch is cleaned out to put the sludge. Right now, there's this huge pile back here of sludge that they were supposed to have taken away 2 months, possibly 3, after the ditch was cleaned out last time, which was last October, a year ago. And it's still sitting there, and the rats love it because the down trees, they piled up on top of that, because when the city cleaned it out, they barked a bunch of trees. They don't bother to tell you that. They've killed a bunch of trees. So there's lots of piles back there. But when they cleaned out the ditch, they piled it up on the edge of the bank. So the bank got higher and higher each time they cleaned it out. So not only when the ditch floods, it doesn't flood equally on both sides. It all goes onto our property on East Wimbledon. So not only do we get flooded, we get extra flooded because the water can't disperse equally on both sides of the ditch. So that's just my one picture to show you. Well, it also shows you this was our bulkhead, and all the flooding that we've had. We've lost 6 to 8 inches of our backyard because our backyard washes away each time it floods. So that bulkhead, our yard was equal, level with that bulkhead.
Are you referring to this as
This-
bulkhead?
This piece of wood was our bulkhead, and our grass was up level with that.
And now, okay.
So, yes. So, and you can see back the ditch on the far side, how much higher it is. Because when they cleaned out the ditch, they piled all the sludge on the other side. So each time they cleaned it out, it just kept getting higher on the other side. So every time the ditch floods, the water all goes on the East Wimbledon side. And that's the entire length of the ditch. So our yard is washing away.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Ms. Green, but I think
Bulkhead.
we've established
Well,
that
I
we got
just
it.
want you to see.
No,
that,
I
you know,
appreciate it. I'm here, yeah.
We have property damage, so not only, and we're the ones with the sinkholes, because you walk through the yard and you where the roots of the trees are, you're going to break an ankle. Or the dogs are.
No, I agree.
Thank you.
Responsible development.
Mr. Hanahan, real quick. Oh,
Totally agree with you.
Okay. I appreciate I appreciate that you haven't had any flooding.
I know she didn't
But
say.
I'm a realtor and on Fort Johnson Road.
Do you mind stating your name for the record?
My name is Franny Henty. I live at 615 Flint Street.
Yes, you live in that house
Okay. But I've sold property where one property is in a flood zone and one isn't. So you got topography that can go up. I know that this land right here, I had a client look at this land. It will not perk. Okay.
I've lived here since, let's see, 2001. Husband had the house since 1995. We knew the owners before that, and they didn't even flood in Pico. But since Regatta's been built right here, and I don't know, 250 units, we've had a lot more flooding down here, to the tune of $2,000 worth of encapsulation underneath our house. We recently did have a lot more flooding. And I do think that Fleming Road, it all, this impervious surface affects us all. And if you don't like listening to this right now, you should try living there and being terrified that your house is going to flood. Now, one thing that is a little more dear to my heart is the fact that back here by Jimmy's house, which I don't think that he told you that his house has flooded 3 times, but he's on a slab, so he can't encapsulate underneath it. But very close to his house, about 5 years ago, I saw a child almost get hit by a car at a bus stop because traffic. We can't handle, the infrastructure can't handle what we have now. And until, it just makes no sense. I mean, Central Park floods at high tide. It just, I don't know. I mean, if you got more people to annex into the city, would you take better care of us or what? I mean, I don't, it doesn't make sense. It's not wise, it's not using good judgment to do it.
And real quick, not to interrupt you, Mr. Hannon, I think we've got the drainage issue down, so if we could temper that a little bit and just...
My name is Bill Hanahan, and I'd like to address zoning and planning and density. And I live somewhere down in this right here. Can you show the other map? I'm not representing anybody here. Officially, I'm an attorney. My neighbor, Harrington Bissell, right here, has had to replace his ductwork 3 times in the last 3 years. Said I wasn't going to address flooding.
That's, I don't mind if you touch on it, but that's fine.
Density
yeah.
and flooding impact are inextricably intertwined. You can't separate the two. So density, we're looking at 40 houses here, 40 residents coming in here, 128 apartments here. This right here is the Fleming Woods, another cluster. So cluster development here, apartments here. I don't know what the one at the intersection of Folly and Central Park Road is called, but that's cluster, and that was it, just where the moratorium is. It was passed. So, look at the impact of all of this on our neighborhood from a density standpoint. Can you switch back to the other one? And as Steve Green pointed out, they're going to be 3. Density here will be 3 times what our neighborhood is. Probably more than that. I think cluster is a perfect term for this type of.
We'll have to wait for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hannon. Yes, sir.
My name is Richard Dahl. I live at 509 West Wimbledon. And that was my wife who spoke earlier. But I would like to point out something that doesn't seem to be emphasized very much. And that is that this is East Wimbledon. It comes around here, and there's West Wimbledon here. We live on West Wimbledon, and we back up to a new development. And that new development was on between 13 and 14 acres. And they have some detention or retention ponds in there, so on and so forth. But since that development was built, when they took out all the trees, except maybe, half a dozen or a dozen, they lost a lot of trees. And now the water draining from there comes in behind our property, down the ditch, coming actually this way, comes around to here, and then goes down the East Wimbledon ditch. And lo and behold, what has happened to East Wimbledon? flooding. West Wimbledon, we don't have the flooding as much, but down on the, as you go north from where we live, the flooding is worse because it's draining that way. So it's draining from south to north and then headed east and then to the canal. So all of a sudden we put all that water in there and we wonder why the people are being flooded. You know, I don't know. I'm not engineer in the sense that water, getting water in there, because there are no trees to take it up. It used to be there. My guess is you're going to get flooded. Okay? And I think the proof in the pudding is there is a lot more flood.
Okay. And real quick, I just want to clarify, I think we've got it on the drainage and the flooding. And part of the reason why I'm asking people not to go on and on about it for obvious reasons, but we have other people on the agenda, and we're trying to be courteous to those folks downstream, to use a bad analogy. And,
I just wanted to point out.
yes, sir. No, you make a valid point. We've got it. We've got it.
Now, if we have another development, we know
Right.
what's going to happen.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
My name's Devin Hanahan. I live in the neighborhood, of course, with Bill Hanahan. And I will be very quick and very non-scientific, and I will only talk about a metaphorical flood, is I want to go on record with thousands of people across this beautiful town who think that we are killing the golden egg that is Charleston. I'm not anti-development across the board, but it's just getting out of control, and I just wanted to be here on record saying the quality of life that is so impacted by the number of people, the traffic. I don't know if any of you have ever been on Central Park Road and the traffic. It almost boggles my mind how James Island's just getting, I mean, the plan sounds so elegant and benign. Come on, we're scraping all the trees up and we're plunking down a bunch of quick build houses to make as much money as possible. I'm a capitalist, but let's call it what it is. It's just, I want to be on record by saying, when are we going to stop? When are we going to try to save Charleston from overdevelopment? So, very emotional and not scientific, and I apologize.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Philip Dustin, and I have a question for you guys in general, to the city and to you. Do you take climate change into consideration when you make these decisions? Because what we've seen in the last 4 years is the greatest flood we've ever seen. We've had two hurricanes that have come by that are wetter than they normally are. And these aren't just freak events. We know that hurricanes are getting larger and they're getting wetter. This year we had a storm that ate Houston, and then we had another one that ate the state of Florida, and then we had another one came along and sort of tore up the Caribbean and came up in here and gave us a little bit of a side issue. So these are going to be becoming more and more and more frequent as time goes on, and sea level is going to rise somewhere between maybe 0.5 meter to 2 meters in the next century. And when you make your decisions, how far out do you look? And how much do you take climate change into consideration? We live in the low country. But what I hear is what I call flat earth planning. Thank you.
We'll let staff address that in a second. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I have a question. I know you are in charge of approving things on a zoning basis and do not have anything to do with the drainage issue, if that's my understanding of what you said at the beginning of this. Is that true?
Just to clarify that there's subdivision rules and regulation, and we're looking at are the rules and regulations of the subdivision process being met via recommendation and staff review. And as part of that ultimate review is a drainage component. And we don't have the authority to look at that and say, I think they've managed the drainage correctly or they've managed it incorrectly.
So that tells me that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Well, they don't collaborate and say,
no,
we've got a serious issue.
There's a lot of collaboration. I would argue strongly against your point.
But you can't take that into account when you make your decision.
We can, the staff does. It's part of the ultimate approval process that this has to go through a rigorous storm drainage analysis through the applicant and through the city and through OCRM and other agency approval and review. And once it meets that criteria, that approval, there has to be some threshold, right? You can't just arbitrarily thumb up, thumb down. So there's a process that it goes through. If it meets those requirements, then yes, it gets approved.
But the city did that with the Fleming Park development also. They went through that same process, and since that has gone up, the flooding has increased dramatically.
Okay. Duly noted.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay. Does the applicant care to respond to any of the questions raised here today?
Really quickly. Some of the things that came up that were actually related to conceptual site plan approval were impervious surface and density. And just want to remind y'all, we're in SR1, which has a 4.8 unit acre max. We're well under that maximum. And the cluster overlay, we're well over the 50% protected open space, which also affects that pervious imperviousness of the site. We're over 50% open space. Some of the things that were mentioned that aren't specifically under y'all's purview. One is stormwater. I mean, we know stormwater is a big issue here. That's why Stephen mentioned it in his staff report. It's why Jason went into a lot of detail on it. We've been to TRC 2 times before coming to y'all. We've done a lot of work on this. How many times? 3 times. And we'll be going through TRC again after this site plan approval. So stormwater will be handled through the TRC process. The other thing that was brought up is trees. We'll handle that through the BZA process. So we're really just asking y'all tonight for conceptual site plan approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that it? Okay.
Mr. Gear, Mr. Chairman, I'm Ellis Leeson. I'm an attorney at 418 King Street. I'm also here on behalf of the applicant. Just wanted to say a few brief words. Thank you. And I know people who are here on both sides of the issue. And again, the applicant is here with a property that is zoned SR1, as the members of the commission are aware. And that is the least dense zoning classification that the city has. And a cluster concept, which is what's being pursued, is actually something that was adopted in 2011 because it preserves more green space and has less impervious surfaces than some of the other forms of development. The applicant and the applicant's professionals have explained the easement that's going to be added for this issue. But again, the applicant comes before you, the Planning Commission, with a zoning classification that's relied upon, it's valid. The plan meets all of the requirements that are applicable. It has staff approval with the condition that they work through the issues with these trees. And so things that involve other neighborhoods and further planning that other departments of the city could have, the need for the county schools to hire more teachers, the need for the DOT to make sure that they trim trees. These are all things that happen in coordination, but it doesn't eliminate the right and that zoning classification that exists, or the fact that this application complies with all of the requirements that are applicable to it. So just wanted to thank you and appreciate everybody for coming out and speaking about it. But again, this is a land that has this classification just like this one did, and just like that one did. And the applicant has the same rights to pursue use of that property that the other applicants had when they came before this commission as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Leeson.
Can I say one last thing?
No, you can't. No, you can't.
One last thing.
I'm sorry. We've heard from everybody. I can't imagine there's more. We're done. I'm sorry. The public hearing's closed. Discussion by the board, comments, questions of applicant or staff?
I guess my general commentary is I don't have any doubt of the engineering calculations associated with this property. I don't have any doubt that it meets the requirements of the subdivision. Having said all of those things, part of the problem we're facing here is, in my view, that the cities and county, depending on where you live, responsibility to maintain these drainage ditches has not been met. So while the calculations are perfectly appropriate and probably do not contribute to a problem, but there is a problem. Sadly, we don't have any authority to instigate solutions to the actual underlying problem, which is not being caused by this. It's being caused by a lack of maintenance in ditches. My daughter lives in one of the surrounding neighborhoods. There is flooding. I've seen it, and I've looked at the ditches. They are not flowing in the direction they're supposed to. They're not cleaned out, and they're not maintained. But we can't fix that here. So it's a source of frustration, and I just want you all to know we don't sit up here and say, oh, we're disregarding you. Not the case. But we're not in a position to make anything happen as it relates to the maintenance of those ditches.
Well, I you know, for the last, I live in South Windermere, and we flooded for the last 3 years. A lot of my neighbors' houses flooded. We had more flooding in this last snowstorm than we've had since Hugo. it's not just a problem with your Central Park Road. It's not a problem with the Church Creek Basin. It's a problem all over Charleston. And Chris is absolutely correct. It has to do with the maintenance of the ditches. It has to do with climate control. You're not the only ones impacted. I mean, people are living with me now whose houses have been flooded 3 times and 4 times in our neighborhood. It's happened, everywhere. So we, believe me, in traffic, Savannah Highway is the worst traffic spot that you could possibly imagine. Traffic is a challenge everywhere, but our commission is we're an advisory commission, and all we have to do is we have to abide by the rules of the ordinances. Overdevelopment, is it happening? That's why moratoriums have been placed on different properties so that we can evaluate, and the city has got to do a better job maintaining the ditches and enlarging the ditches. And I think that they put these, there's no doubt that development causes more stormwater problems. But in a cluster scenario, even if they would have developed Fleming Park as single-family lots, I believe that it still would have added to the drainage issues that are at hand. So all we can do is try to add more detention ponds in developments, but we are just following what is a by right opportunity for a single-family property development. So that's our challenge. I mean, we understand and we feel every problem that you have addressed tonight. A lot of it's not in our purview, and we can't solve the drainage problem in Charleston or the traffic problem in Charleston. We just can't do it. I wish we could.
Let me ask this. I'm going to play devil's advocate here for just a moment. If we continue to approve developments that, obviously there are some real issues with, and people are saying that if you approve another one, it's only going to exacerbate the issue that already exists, then where does it end? Right. How does the city come to realize that they must do something about what is causing the problems?
If you own that property, then you own it.
I have to agree with Elise. I can't sleep at night knowing that we're going to approve a subdivision. Believe me, I'm in the real estate business. I'm not trying to thwart anybody's ability to make money off their land. That's what I do for a living. That's what's fed me for the last 32 years. But I cannot sleep at night knowing that I would possibly do something to affect someone's house where they're going to have more. I don't think all of these people would come in here tonight and tell us that their homes are facing potential serious drainage problems, and then we're supposed to, just because they've met the criteria, we're supposed to just rubber stamp it. I don't feel like that's right. I can't sleep at night and do that. So I will not approve any more subdivisions where I feel like there is a drainage problem and flooding is going to be an issue. So if someone's not happy with that, please call Mayor Tecklenburg and have me removed from this commission, because I'm not going to approve any more.
Thank you.
I can't sleep. I cannot in good conscience. Now, if y'all want to follow rules, that's fine and good, but you got to have a conscience. You've got to be able to look at these people and say, okay, well, if one of these developers is going to say, well, I'm going to live in that neighborhood, then I'm fine with it. But they don't live there. It's not fair to these people for us to approve these and continue to approve them and know good and well it's going to flood over there. We all know it's going to flood.
It already does.
It already does. It's going to get worse. It's not fair to them, and I'm sorry for the folks that have money in this dirt or who want to develop this thing, but you all don't live there. And it's not fair to them. It really isn't. I can't do it. Y'all do what y'all want to do, but I know what I have to do.
Mr. Chair, when we see these subdivision requests, we see the most upset neighbors are the ones that meet with the builders the least. And you all met once. I think you all said there was one invitation.
Laurel Park never met with them.
Okay, so apparently there was one invitation. I think some people met with you all at least one time. And you all, I want to go back to the beginning of this meeting, which was you're saying 3 times.
And several follow-up phone calls.
And with city council members.
Well, I'm talking about some neighborhoods specifically.
And the neighbors.
Okay, all right. What we see, well, there's a difference there apparently, but I give you the example of the Society Street, the first one that was on the agenda tonight, which was downtown, which is a very sensitive area downtown. That builder, they met for a year, and then they actually came to an agreement. So we just think that, from what I've seen, the more understanding, the more communication between builders and neighborhoods, it just helps. I don't know if you all would have come to an agreement, and I'm agree with you on that. But at the same time, I just think it helps. The more communication between the neighborhoods and the developers.
We started our communication with them in April.
Okay.
And Robbie, I think it's a little different with the workforce housing and sort of
Reason-
a
reason-
mixed-use rezoning and a single-family
It's
subdivision.
a different issue, but across the board, I've just seen it.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah,
I mean, I
yeah.
agree.
I know I won't necessarily be everybody's favorite in saying this, but there have to be guidelines and rules established in order for people to move through a process. Sorry, Terry.
No, you're
And-
right ahead.
And otherwise, nobody could do anything. If you're constantly moving the goalpost, nobody can ever get anything accomplished, right? So these guidelines exist. Then as far as we could go on and on about climate change, we can go on about hurricanes, but folks that have lived here, I think, in my personal opinion, we had an anomaly the last 2 years with the flood hitting at a high tide when Matthew came through. Thank goodness it was at a low tide, otherwise everybody would have been destroyed. Irma came through on a high tide. It was the highest surge since Hugo that we've experienced. So is it going to flood? Yes. Now, I'm not saying that I disagree with what's happening on your neighborhood. I think with the cluster development, and I guess my question to staff and you as the engineer and the TRC process, on this particular site, in general, we look at wetlands, trees, land use, and we do look at storm drainage, but what's if you have grand trees or you have wetlands, we work around those things. There's buffers or tree protection, that sort of stuff. The drainage issue here, it appears that this is kind of at a bottleneck point, if you will, where there's multiple canals, as a gentleman described, from west to east or whichever way it's going, come into the neighborhood. And if there's anticipated future maintenance of these ditches, and someone brought up the hauling, the practicality of material and getting equipment in, I guess part of the sins of the past is that there really weren't great stormwater methodologies in place. A lot of these neighborhoods got developed without any storm. I don't know what happened in Marlboro, but chances are it probably didn't have some civil engineer do what's that?
Marlboro neighborhood, they have no detention ponds.
No detention ponds, so the concentration of runoff from some of these older neighborhoods is much greater than the newer neighborhoods. So I hate to say it, some of these older neighborhoods are actually generating more runoff faster than the newer ones are. But with that said, what I guess my question is and I get the whole cluster thing and what's going on, but and maybe you've accounted for this. I'm just raising this question for my own education. Are the ditches, the new canals, the existing canals, proposed canals, are they wide enough to anticipate some future maintenance issues with equipment coming in without, and I know you've got tree issues, can equipment get in there? And I know the people in Marlboro don't want any equipment in their backyard, so it's got to go in these people's backyard, which is a whole other argument about property rights. And they're throwing it's great, but they're digging those ditches out and they're throwing it on your family's property. I mean, you're probably not real happy about that, but they're not throwing it in in Mr. Green's backyard. Everybody lives in Mr. Green's, but I guess it's not an easy solution, and I hate that everybody's pointing the finger at these guys as if they're horrible people. They're trying to get something. They've got a piece of property, family owned. They're trying to get something done. They're meeting all the requirements. They're addressing the greatest of their ability. So I think you're out of line a little bit, in my opinion. If you feel the way you feel it, so be it. This is the way I feel. That would be my concern if the thing was to move forward, that there's above and beyond consideration given to these drainage concerns, particularly from a maintenance standpoint, and that the ponds possibly they might already be over-designed. And if there's ability to accommodate extra detention, somebody brought that up, great. But if I think you brought that up, but if you want to turn that into a giant detention pond, then y'all need to get together and buy it, or I don't even know that would solve the problem. So that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, we're on the.
If we give the city an easement to maintain it, they don't maintain it. It's not going to matter.
Well, and how did, can I ask
Chris,
a
come on.
question?
I'm down with everything you just said, but at the end of the day, we got to get the city to step up and do what they need to do.
And they will.
I'm all about property rights. I have no doubt that this thing is designed properly, and I'm going to support it. But I don't like the fact that we're setting it up for failure and blame when the reality is the responsibility is on the city to maintain the drainage system throughout the community.
And I don't like that we're put in a
And we're
position
standing here
where
getting shot at for it,
we're getting the brunt of your feelings, and that's not
They
fair.
are not bad guys.
I agree.
Y'all are bad guys. It's the way the system works.
I would like to say I'm disappointed that Councilmember Gregory is no longer with us because he's actually one of the people who can actually do something about this. Anyway.
Well, one of the things that I think
Councilman.
about is his comment, and if in fact it is true that the city needs to update its drainage policies, procedures, whatever, then as good as this is, if they are in concert with what the city requires, if in fact what the city requires is not enough, then is it really going to do what it needs to do in order to protect not only the proposed community, but not impact on the other communities around?
I have a question. Just curious, how did they get in now to maintain the ditch and push it on this property? There's got to be an access point to get in to maintain the ditches now. How does that occur? Good question.
To be honest, some of the neighbors can probably answer that better than I can. That's all the maintenance issues. That is all within our public service department. So I, being in the planning department, am not as familiar with all those maintenance.
I don't know that we need an answer to that necessarily.
No, I'm not
yeah,
opening it up. I just
Yeah.
wondered how it's. No, we're not taking anything right now. So it was just a question that we're getting this easement, and it disturbs me that we would then remove the trees in order to get access to the easement. They made it real clear that's not their job. That's what we have. That's what the easement has to do. And I hate that. I hate that those trees would be removed because that absorbs the water. And I think it's to try to get to the water, you're going to remove the trees that take the water. So that doesn't seem like a sound plan to me. But what do I know? I'm not an engineer.
Well, we need to make a motion on it, and because it's a cluster development, you can add extra criteria. I mean, you can turn it down, I guess, if you want to, Mrs. Seabrook, but, we need somebody to step up and make a
You think, are we going to have any impact on them maintaining the ditches? Can we require
You can make a condition
that the ditches be maintained before they build this subdivision?
That's not their. They can't make that
Well, that's what I'm
happen.
saying.
The developer can't make. If the
You have to have-
residents can't make them.
Right, the city can't get it done. I mean, who's going to?
The same way if somebody commits a crime that you're going to expect a police officer to show up, you have to make an assumption that there's going to be some maintenance of the pond. Or of the.
And Terry, I mean, honestly, it's never flooded. There's not been any new development in my neighborhood that I'm aware of, but it's coming across in the higher tide. So it's, right, no, it's flooded all over. I went and looked at the ditch. I went and walked through the whole property.
I'm going to go home to a cold house because I don't have any ducks in my place. Seriously.
But I mean, we go to bed with the conscience too, Terry. I mean, it's not that we don't, but we have.
You
I
don't have a
listen,
conscience. You can listen. You have your opinion, and I have mine.
Right.
We're all entitled to our opinion. You don't have to. I mean, look, I'm going to express my opinion.
Terry, I've known you long enough to know that.
All right, yeah.
You can take that to the bank. Okay. So you have yours, and I have mine. I'm moving for disapproval.
I'll second.
Ideally, that's a second. And what we experienced with this in the past is, I'm just going to say, if you turn it down, you need to give some reasons why. So if you're in your motion, as a recommend.
Because
I think she stated those reasons.
Yeah, right.
But it's part of her motion. It's part of your motion. It needs to go. Otherwise,
okay,
they're going to show up a lawyer.
Well, I mean, the city of Charleston, if in fact they are not maintaining the ditches that are going to service this subdivision, then I don't think it's fair to put another subdivision on top of these folks that are already experiencing a flooding problem. And I don't think it's fair. And that's why I'm moving for disapproval.
Can I ask a question?
But you made a motion, we have a second.
We have a second.
Okay, so discussion.
So to be clear, if the motion to disapprove is denied, it's approved?
The motion fails, and then there's a new one.
So they would have to have another follow-on motion?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Need to understand procedurally where we're going.
Okay. Well, just from a discussion standpoint, we'll call for the question. I just don't think you can deny an application on a drainage that we don't have any purview over. So I just want to say that. But call for the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
And you just saw me vote no there. The reason is because legally, I believe we have to approve this. I don't want to approve it, okay? But legally, I think we have to. And I believe the answer is a legislative solution. We're not the legislative body here. We're an appointed board. City council passes the laws, and the direction needs to be in their purview. The city councilman was here earlier. They passed the ordinances. In addition, I encourage you to contact your state representative in Columbia, because the zoning laws need to change. And so, but having said that, I have to vote for it because I have no choice, because it fits the zoning. So I have to vote for it, but I don't want to. But
additional easement.
Let me say something. If it had been denied, believe me, tomorrow morning they would be on someone's doorstep getting this issue resolved. The developer would be. Yes, they would be. It's too much money involved in this. That's what they would do. They would get this resolved tomorrow.
Get what resolved tomorrow?
The issue with regard to the ditches being cleaned up.
Clean the ditches.
The maintenance. They would. And then if they came back and
All right,
said,
we're way off.
okay, well, I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
That's what you wanted to know.
I don't quite understand what the purpose of this commission is.
Exactly.
We don't
We have frustration.
good question.
First, I'd like to ask the chairman if you would be so willing to appear before council, or I'll do it for you if you don't, and implore them to understand the challenge that we're facing with regard to this, because this is not the first time we've had this conversation. This is not the first neighborhood. These are not the first applicants.
A councilman spoke against it tonight.
I understand, but he didn't offer a solution. He just said there's a problem.
And he's not proposing an ordinance at council for them to vote on.
And so I would like to just say that we need to make sure that council is hearing not just from the residents, but from us. We're all frustrated with this problem, and I would implore them to come up with a solution. Because if we can solve that problem, then these conversations get a whole lot easier. It's unfair for these folks to have to show up. We have to approve it because it meets the ordinance, and yet they've spent several hours here expressing their frustration, and we're in a box.
And I've been doing this for
And I
35
share their
years,
frustration.
and it is frustrating.
In spite of all that, I'm going to recommend approval because I believe it meets the ordinance.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and I would ask that the motion include a recommendation that the drainage easements be evaluated to make sure that they accommodate
exceed more than exceed the
current capacity.
For that.
Condition.
Yeah.
A condition of the approval.
I accept that change to the provision.
I'll second that amendment.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Opposed?
You're going to add the drainage easements will exceed the
requirement of
ability-
the
right.
neighborhood.
Then I will agree with it.
Okay.
No,
Yeah. Everybody in favor say aye.
That's all.
I'm
You're opposed? Okay. One opposed. Oh, boy. That sucked.
And Mrs. McFarland wanted me to say that it's not a fashion statement. She had some eye work done. Eye condition.
very glad.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I share their frustration. My daughter lives in there, but plays back up all the time. You can stand there and look at the ditches. And
How you doing?
Good.
clean your carpets, remember?
Yeah, man, that's right. Absolutely.
You recognize it?
Yeah.
Don't worry, I don't have a problem.
Not in that context, but now that you say it, I absolutely do.
Before I leave, just please make them exceed the drainage.
We're going
So they can collect
to
on
get
it.
together. We're going to get together and talk about some other ways to solve this.
Yeah.
We got to get city council.
Have a good night. Have a good night.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. This is, it's just everywhere.
It's everywhere. And it's frankly, it's a frustration
They
for
don't
me.
know the rules. They don't know. I mean, they
You
don't
can
know our
look-
discretion.
I can show you storm drains that have weeds growing out of them because everywhere. Culverts are not being maintained.
Right.
You go back and do that, their calculations work because they're doing it based on known
Right.
engineering things.
But we also need to go back to what we said to Francis about taking these off our agenda.
Yes.
And make it a permanent issue.
But the cluster is within, we can make comments. I mean, I don't know that you can just flat out turn it down, but you can make specific, you could have said,
Turn it down, they'll be fixing it tomorrow, okay?
we'll
Trust
see.
me. You think that developer wouldn't fix it
This
tomorrow?
is a huge problem.
I know it is.
This
All right.
is a gigantic problem. They can't just go fix it in one day.
No, he would get it fixed.
all right,
I got to run.
everybody still here? I apologize, this is going on and on. Where are we? Number 3, Canehoy Office and Retail Park, Clements Ferry Road. Canehoy